Oh, hey, everybody. It's good to see you guys coming in. That's great. Hi, Sue Grassman. It's nice to put a name, face to the name. Welcome. Hi, Julia. Good to see you tonight. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to wait a few more minutes just so everybody can arrive. I want to just check my email to make sure that I don't have anyone looking for a link. So I'm going to give everybody one more minute. Well, actually, it just changed to 7:07. All right, let's go ahead and start. Welcome again, everyone. I just want to do a brief overview of the John P. Webster Library. We are an outreach ministry of First Church West Hartford in West Hartford Center, Connecticut. We like to say at our church, wherever you are, whoever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. And of course, that's the way we feel tonight. You know, we're very glad that you joined us, and especially with these crucial issues regarding youth mental health. We are, you know, just so happy to be able to offer these programs and events to help people kind of get up to speed on what we might not all be understanding. So this program is offered in collaboration with the Hartford Healthcare System, and they reached out to Connecticut libraries and asked if we wanted to do any kind of programming. So at our library, we chose youth issues, but if you check your local libraries, you might find there are other mental health or any regular health issues and programs being offered. So I urge you to don't stop here. You know, there's lots of free programs available for your education and enlightenment. And tonight we have Dr. Peter DeRosa talking to us about youth gambling and online betting, which, you know, when I first heard about this, I thought, why? But it turns out that with Connecticut's recently, well, I'm going to let Peter tell you all about it, but just to say that just as easily as youth have, we all have our phones in our hands as much as we do, it's that easy for a teenager to be betting online, and especially since sports betting was legalized here in Connecticut. So I'll let Peter take it from here, telling us about himself and explaining his and doing his program. Thanks a lot for joining us, though. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate it. Yeah, my name is Peter DeRosa. I am an employee at Nat Jog Hospital. I was an employee at Nat Jog Hospital before Hartford Healthcare was a thing. So I go back a few years. And Jennifer, with all due respect, I am not a doctor, but I do have a master's degree in counseling, and I have been in the field of counseling for probably more than 40 years. I'm afraid to do the math right now.
Thank you.
I was administrator for much of that time, and as I'm getting closer to retirement, I sort of backed away from that and just doing direct service again, which is far more rewarding and just as many gray hairs, but it's far more rewarding. So yeah, Jennifer, with the thing with sports gambling, that sort of kind of came up in Connecticut. It just sort of crept up, and nobody really paid much of attention to it until it started becoming legal. And then we looked into it and found out that it's a huge thing. One of the things that Nat Jog Hospital struggles with is trying to identify people that have gambling issues. My office that I work at for Natchog is located in Groton, which is in between Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun, two of the largest casinos in the world. And we worked with the state of Connecticut trying to figure out, well, why aren't we seeing all kinds of people with all kinds of gambling problems? We see them occasionally. And I'll talk more about shifting addictions and how people develop gambling habits when they give up other addictions, especially with the casinos being so close to us. And what we're prepared to see and what we're beginning to see is a increase in the number of people with sports gambling since it became legalized. And is not as visible because of the technology. And you don't have to go to a casino to engage in sports gambling. You go to the Mohegan Sun, they have a lot of square footage dedicated to sports gambling, and you can go around and play. And it was busy when I was up there looking at it. So what I'm going to do is talk about sports gambling, but I would like to ask Sue and Julia kind of what you're hoping to get out of this presentation, because with the low numbers here, we can pretty much cater to what you're looking for. So I don't know if you want to be unmuted. Yeah. And just kind of tell me what you're hoping to get out of this.
Thank you, Peter. I'm a grandmother. I'm a retired nurse, but I have 3 grandsons. And the oldest is 14 and down 11. And I should know this, but I can't remember. There are 3 of them.
You could just tell me the age and I wouldn't know that you forgot.
Yeah, I know. Make it up. But I am concerned about sports gambling. I do know that it's new to the state, at least online. And all the kids have the technology now. And I do think despite being good kids, who isn't vulnerable these days?
Right.
So I think it's really, I'm hoping to become more educated about it, just to be kind of sensitized to some, triggers, things that I might be alert to, and so on, just to become, more aware.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sue, you're muted. You also blanked out your screen. You can't look at you while you talk.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
we can hear you.
Okay. I have a new iPhone, so I'm kind of getting used to it. So actually I go to Emmanuel Congregational Church, and they've put together a program. They're trying to pair seniors with members of the youth population there. And these classes were just kind of, shared with us. If anybody has an interest in going, feel free. And I thought, I just retired, and, I've got the time, and I am kind of interesting because I don't have any kids of my own or grandkids or anything. And I feel like I'm kind of out of the loop on stuff. So I'm trying to get more familiar with like good things that are going on with the young people, but things that could also be problematic.
Okay. All right. That's great. Thank you for that. So I'm gonna go through this. Obviously, there's not a lot of you there, so just interrupt with questions. And
I think we have one more person.
Cool.
Sherry Smartin. Would you like to share with us where your interests lie in terms of youth sports gambling?
Hi, I work with Natchog, so I just love joining in to listen to Peter talk, although I do have 2 college age daughters who are both athletes. So I find the sports gambling, and I have my own opinions on it. So I'm curious to hear what Peter has to say.
Right. Thanks for joining us. I work with youth too, and I'm kind of curious about like, how can we address the issues with them as we go forward in conversation and so on with the youth themselves.
All right. Well, I'll try to skew this to the youth as much as I can. I think my only qualifications now is I just became a grandfather, so I don't know, and I haven't thought about my grandson and sports gambling yet. He's only 5 weeks old. So
congrats!
We'll give him a chance.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, So just to kind of start with definitions of gambling. In the clinical world, and when we do psychotherapy, when we do treatment, when we do counseling, we kind of have our own language and our own verbiage. So when we talk about problem gambling or gambling addiction or pathological gambling, they're all variations on a continuum. So kind of in a broad sense, we're talking about gambling addiction, and it's an uncontrollable urge to gamble. The difference, it's whether you're gambling and it's okay or gambling and it's a problem, has to do with your relationship with gambling. And so one of the key things is whether you can control your urge to gamble or you have to gamble. You know, in a broader sense, gambling means you're willing to risk something for something else. I'm going to put down $10 with the hopes of getting 100. I'm going to put down a pink slip on my car with the hopes of getting, you know, $10,000 or whatever. Gambling does stimulate your brain and does trigger parts of your brain, much like drugs and alcohol do. And interestingly, I don't know how much time you have spent in the casinos, but they do design the casinos to trigger those parts of the brain. They don't have clocks, they don't have windows. There's sounds that they put out. Sometimes they increase the oxygen level, all to trigger the same parts of the brain, the reward systems of the brain, much like drugs and alcohol do. Some myths to go around gambling. In order to have a problem gambling, you have to gamble every day. No, that's not true. It just has to be a problem. Okay. People that gamble more than they should are weak or irresponsible or unintelligent. Not necessarily true. Actually, fairly intelligent people get involved in gambling because they think they can beat the system. And then it gets the last myth that we have on here has to do with enabling the gambler, that as the parent or grandparent that we're responsible to take care of them when they have a problem. Well, we can help them solve the problem, but we don't have to fix it for them. Okay, meaning paying off their debts. This is an interesting point with how we think about gambling, and kind of one of the cues or as to whether the relationship that this individual has with gambling is healthy or unhealthy. And it's referred to as the gambler's fallacy. There's other words, there's other names for this, but this is essentially saying that that you can predict the future by past events in gambling. So if you roll the dice and you get, you know, 2 6s, that's not going to happen the next time you roll the dice. Well, statistically speaking, you have the same chance. The example that I have on the slide is if you have 7 girls in your family and you get pregnant, what are the chances that the 8th one is going to be a girl? It's still 50-50, regardless of how many you had before. And so what happens is people don't accept that as part of gambling. And so they have these thoughts in their head that, you know, this ticket is going to be my lucky ticket. If I go to this slot machine, I'm going to do better than if I go to that slot machine. People have rituals. They have to carry something in their pocket or wear their favorite shirt or something like that that's going to increase their chances, trying to affect the odds that they're going to win. So that, again, it's if you're looking to try to identify whether someone has a healthy or unhealthy relationship with gambling, has to do with their relationship. And if they're engaged in this type of thinking, you know, we have clients coming in here and we do a screening and we'll say, well, you know, and they'll say, well, I'm spending $100 a week on scratch off tickets. I'm like, I know what you do for a living. You don't make that kind of money. You know, that could be a problem. Oh, no, I have a system. You know, well, the system is you buy the ticket and you scratch it off and you either win or you don't, you know, so that's something to look for. Just kind of going on with this, that I'm smarter than other gamblers. I can change my luck. And these beliefs become more intense and people become more convinced of them, the more desperate people become with their gambling habit. So Typically what happens with a, and I'm overgeneralizing, but a typical gambler will go in, they'll hit a big win, they'll win $1,000, they'll win the, whatever, and then they'll go back and they'll lose. And then it's what we call chasing the losses. They keep going, okay, I'll go back again. Well, I'll take out another $500 on my credit card and I'll go back and gamble, trying to win it back. And we call it chasing the losses. And the more desperate people become with that is when these convictions become more real in their head. That I know I can do it this time. I know I lost last night, so I have to win tonight, kind of thing. So where are we here? So in terms of sports betting and just gambling in general, we're seeing an increase in gambling. I mean, we have the two giant casinos here. We're seeing them expanding. And then recently with the expansion of sports gambling. And sports gambling is just huge. There's a whole network of sports gambling, a whole underground network of sports gambling. And it's becoming increasingly acceptable, and it's legal, and it's becoming more widespread. So in the treatment field, we're ramping up for this, and we're preparing for it. So I don't know that I want to bore you with DSM-5 diagnostic. That's the book that we use to make diagnoses. Julia, you're a nurse. You're probably more familiar with this book than you want to be. The DSM-5, yeah, okay.
It's been a long time.
Okay, well, it's up to 5 now. Okay,
Oh.
it's up to 5. Just real quickly, these are the criteria that we use. There's 9 criteria on this page, 9 criteria that we use to decide if someone meets the criteria for a gambling diagnosis. Need to gamble with increasing amounts of money, okay? Is restless and irritable when they try to stop gambling, or they cut down gambling, or they can't bet on the game. If the Super Bowl's happening and you're told you can't gamble on it, and then they become, irritable and cranky. They have made attempts to stop gambling or to cut back or to regulate it. Often preoccupied with gambling. Again, this has to do with the relationship that we have with gambling. Are we always thinking about it? Are we always thinking about the next time, the game on Saturday? Not in terms of who's playing, but in terms of what the relationship is with the gambling and what the point spread is and that sort of thing. And gambling becomes a coping skill. I am upset, therefore I'm going to gamble. That's not a good combination. Number 6 is what I was talking about before, was chasing the losses. I lost on the game, therefore I'm going to go back next week and bet more money to try to get it back. And then we get into the concealment and lying and covering up, and I'm not telling them, and I told you I wasn't going to gamble, but I really did, but I'm not going to tell you, that sort of thing. And then it becomes increasingly serious when it starts interfering with your relationships and your job. Every once in a while we read about someone in the newspaper who's, scam money from their job. Oftentimes that's related to gambling. And then relies on others to bail them out when they're in a pinch. So we take those and then we put them on scales. If you hit 4 or 5 of them, you have a gambling problem. And if you hit 8 or 9 of them, it's called severe or pathological or dependence, whatever word you want to attach to it. So it's on a continuum. You can have a little bit of a problem with gambling that can be managed, or you can have a severe problem that may need some pretty significant intervention. So it works on a continuum like most other diagnoses that we deal with. Sports gambling. We don't have a DSM-5 definition for sports gambling yet, but these are some of the things that we look for. Excessive time spent on the internet. Again, it could be anything. With the 14-year-old, it could be anything, but obsession with point spreads in the game, if they're talking about sports rather than some of the strategy, they're talking about point spreads. If they're interested in obscure games, because sometimes the odds are better on games that are less popular. Hanging around with other people that are engaged in sports betting. This is an interesting one. If, all week long you're talking about one team and then all of a sudden you switch your mind, maybe they heard something about the team and all of a sudden they're going to start rooting for the other team because they think they're going to make more money on it. As with many disorders, asking people for money or getting defensive if you ask them about gambling or the relationship with gambling, and financial difficulties. Okay. And again,
Peter?
yes, ma'am.
What is a point spread?
How much they win or lose the game by.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
That's one of the things that you can bet on.
I see. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm not going to bore you with a lot of statistics, but I found this one interesting. Okay. So in the research that I've done, some of the research says 1% of the population has a problem with gambling. Other research says 5% of the people have problem with gambling. And I think that has to do with the lack of comprehensive research and also has to do with how the questions are being asked and how they're defining gambling. So if 5% of the people have a problem gambling, that's 5% of the population. If you take 15% of those away, because 15% of the population don't gamble at all, so you're talking about 10% of the people that gamble potentially have a problem gambling. That's a high number. That's a high number with any kind of a diagnosis. So I just like to spin that hat on the statistics. And then some other statistics that are interesting to us as treatment providers is 76%, and again, these numbers vary in how they're defined, but 3/4 of the people that have problems with gambling may also carry a depressive disorder diagnosis, major depression or some kind of depressive disorder. Nearly half the people that have a gambling diagnosis have become suicidal at one point. Okay, 1/3 of the people with gambling problems have trouble with alcohol. Over half the people that have problems with gambling have put their jobs or relationships at risk, either lose marriages or have lost their jobs. 38% have stolen or done other illegal things to gain money. For the adolescents, okay, if adolescents gamble, 3 times more likely that they're going to drink, or 4 times more likely they're going to smoke cigarettes, or twice as likely to use illegal drugs, get into fights, or get into trouble with the police. So it correlates with these other problem behaviors. It's not a cause and effect, but there's a correlation. Okay. All right, one more set of statistics. This is specific to sports gambling. When sports gambling became legal in New York, 1.1 million gambling accounts were created in the first 2 weeks after it became legal. That's a lot in anybody's book. Okay. 90% of the people that signed up were new to sports betting online. And I believe the statistics have been rattling around since the last Super Bowl was $7.5 billion was bet on the Super Bowl. I don't know how they captured that because I don't think all that was legal, but that's what was estimated as being bet on the Super Bowl a few weeks ago. All right. And again, I'm not quite sure how the research was done, but they're saying about 5% of male athletes, it's more males with sports betting than it is females. And so with the male athletes have provided information for the betting, for gamblers and people that are gambling on it. College athletes are more likely to gamble than non-athletes. And 1 in 20 male students have admitted to providing information or throwing a game or doing something to affect the results of a game for sports betting. So this is okay. So the research in 2019 was $13 billion was on sports gambling. However, a couple of weeks ago, $7.5 billion was just bet on Super Bowl. So it has increased exponentially. This one's scary that by the time a gambler gets into treatment, they're usually in debt twice their annual income. And then again, I'm back to the, you know, how many people, and most people with serious gambling problems don't access treatment. It's just not part of the thing. And that's what we're trying to normalize, that getting treatment is okay. So with the legalization and increased popularity in sports gambling, we're seeing that the young adults, which is Julia, you know, which you're interested in, it's becoming more the norm in that world. You know, March Madness, poker, casinos, fundraisings, it's becoming more popular in fraternities. There's new gaming companies creeping up, and it's always there on your cell phone. All you got to do is click the app and you're there. Okay. It's not like the old days we had to get in the car and drive to the casino. So ways to kind of guidelines to tell if someone has a problem with gambling is, and this is one of the scales that we use in diagnosing how serious a gambling problem is. You know, have you bet more than you can afford to? Do you continuously bet with increasing amounts of money to get the same rush that you did before? Again, we call it chasing the losses. You go back another day to win back the money that you lost the night before. You know, with sports gambling, it's the next week's game. Have you hawked your mother's antiques or sold your guitar to get money to gamble? Do you think that you may have had a problem with gambling? That's a good wake-up call. And have people suggested that you may have a gambling problem and felt guilty about your gambling? Or has your gambling caused you anxiety and stress? And obviously, it's usually when gambling causes financial problems, which is not hard to do. So I'm not going to go into all this. But what the point of this slide is that usually gambling co-occurs with other issues with a young adult or an adult. Usually it correlates with substance abuse or depression or anxiety. Now, one of the phenomenons that we've seen is that, and we see that a lot in the programs that we have here at Natural Hospital, is that people come in for a substance abuse problem. I have a problem with heroin. I have a problem with alcohol. I have a problem with cocaine. Okay, you go in, you do your treatment, you go to your AA meetings, you go to your NA meetings, you're not using the alcohol, you're not using the drugs. What are you going to do with all your spare time? Well, I'm going to go to the casino. And then they start deciding the slot machines are really cool because it gives them, remember I said, it gives them the same rush. You get the same level of excitement. But gambling's legal, so it's not a problem. You know, so is alcohol. But, so we see a lot of that. And that's one of the things we have to look for carefully when we see people in addictions, is that substitute one addiction for another. And gambling with the casinos here, it's a place to go. It's exciting and it's stimulating. And you know, it's hard to go from hustling on the streets for drugs to collecting butterflies, you know, so we tend to do something more exciting, and gambling kind of fits that bill. And sports gambling is cool because you're hanging around with the guys and you're talking sports, and it's acceptable to talk about sports. So that's just something to watch for. We see a strong correlation with gambling and bipolar disorder. We see a strong correlation with gambling and anxiety disorders such as obsessive compulsive and ADHD. We're seeing an increase of younger and middle-aged people with gambling. Since the casinos, we've always seen older people at the casinos with the slot machines. So there's a lot of conflicting research on who's got the worst problems with that. But and same with gender, whether women gamble more than men or men gamble more than women. But I would say from what we've seen, men are much more involved in sports gambling than women are. And then, there's a lot of research breaking it down to the different generations. But one thing is clear is that if a kid starts gambling or grows up in a household where gambling is acceptable, it's going to increase their chances of becoming a problem gambler as an adult. I
Peter,
don't know.
what about just random gambling for fun? Like you buy a lottery ticket when the value's up to millions and that kind of thing.
If it's controlled, it's fine. It's fine. It's again, it's your relationship with it.
Right.
If you're buying a lottery ticket when my threshold is 500 million, and then I'll buy a lottery ticket,
Yeah.
a whole $2,
Right.
And that's harmless. That's not harmful because I can afford the $2.
Yeah.
And it's not bad. But the person who's spending, $100 a week on scratch off tickets,
Yeah.
and they make $200 a week, and they can't get gas in their car,
Yeah.
that becomes a problem. So again, it's a relationship with it.
Yeah.
Everybody that bets on sports doesn't mean it's a problem.
Right.
Okay. If you dropped $100 on the Super Bowl and you lost it, and okay, I guess I'm not going out to dinner tonight. That's not a pathological gambler.
Right.
Okay, it's think of it in terms of someone who drinks and a problem drinker, or someone who eats junk food and or is obese. It's again, it has to do with the relationship with it. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I would go down and buy my newspaper off the corner gas station for I did this for years, and I would go at relatively the same time in the morning, every morning, same car, same man in there behind the steering wheel scratching off his tickets.
Right.
Every day. I thought, oh my gosh, this is got a problem.
I don't know if he has a problem. If he says, I would rather spend $20 a week on scratch off tickets than going out to lunch, and that's his choice, and he stays within the budget and nothing suffers, and he gets his jollies out of fantasizing what he would do with the millions.
Yeah.
It's not hurting him, it's not hurting anyone else.
Yeah.
But you want to again watch the signs. If when he loses and it starts getting $25, or he doesn't have the $20 this week because his car broke down and he goes and steals the $20, then it becomes it's more with the relationship with it than the act. And that's where it gets tricky.
Out of curiosity then, you talked some about the intersection between, depression and gambling.
Yeah.
If that same person was, exhibiting that behavior, buying those tickets consistently, but they're never winning and they feel sad and depressed, would gambling be part of the problem that they have? Would that be something that you would be treating people for in addition to depression, suicidality? I'm just curious.
Looking at the relationship. Okay, if typically, is the gambling a symptom of the depression? I get depressed, I go out, I gamble, I feel better. Okay, that's a slippery slope. Now, if I'm depressed, I go out and I buy $5 worth of lottery tickets and I feel better, and I can easily afford the $5, it's probably not that much of a problem. But if it goes up every week, then it becomes a problem. Or if I don't buy the lottery ticket and I sink into a depression, okay, that's when it would be, they closed the lottery office because of COVID, and then I'm going to isolate for the weekend and be depressed because I can't buy the lottery ticket. Then that relationship is a problem. What we tend to see is gambling is oftentimes a symptom of some of these underlying things. Bipolar with the manic episodes, and the manic, and then they go out at midnight and they're dropping $1,000 the poker table at the casino. That would be a symptom of the manic behavior. If they do that once, the problem is bipolar, not gambling. But if they're doing it every night, then it becomes, and if they can't gamble and they have symptoms, that's one of the things, where is it on here? somewhere I said, if you don't gamble, you start getting anxiety and stress. It's the same. If you want to draw the same correlation to, I have a glass of wine with dinner every night. I don't. If I have a glass of wine with dinner every night and it's not causing any problems, it's okay. But if I miss one night and I don't have the glass of wine because I forgot to go to the store and I'm shaking and miserable and irritable, then the drinking is a problem, even though it's only one bottle of wine or one glass of wine. So it has to do with did I answer your question?
That makes perfect sense. Yes.
It does? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't always make sense. That's why I'm just, okay. So, so the risk factors are, change in behavior. And again, I mean, ultimately what we look for is the relationship. But when you kind of get into it. So these are obvious things. Gambling can affect our relationships if we're spending the rent money on gambling and not on our rent. Obviously, financial problems, legal problems. If you're on the sports websites at work instead of doing your job, that could be a problem. Again, it can be tied into health with the stress and anxiety, and then we get into financial problems and we become suicidal because my life insurance is worth more than I am, kind of things. There is a relationship between addictions and physical heart issues, intestinal issues, blood pressure issues, and obviously sleep. So, okay, this is sort of what we were talking about, I think. Kind of the causes of addiction. I probably shouldn't have used the word cause. But one of the attractions to gambling is the rush, the thrill. And it's exciting. You go into the casino, it's exciting. Betting on the Super Bowl is exciting. The game in of itself is an exciting game. And then if you have money on it, it makes it more, you're more into it. And it's this guy, the Jeopardy guy there, James Holzhauer. I don't know how many people took to gambling because of him, but I mean, I don't know if you're all familiar with him. He was a Jeopardy champ. And his profession was a professional gambler in Las Vegas. And he made a pretty good living. He's still playing poker. So he glorified it, what in the populations that we treat at Natchog Hospital, oftentimes gambling and sports gambling coexists with other disorders, bipolar, depression, anxiety, those kinds of things. And clearly coincides with substance abuse. Clearly. We see that a lot. People will give up the cocaine, give up the heroin, give up the alcohol, and start hanging out at the casinos. And that's a very dangerous thing. So the triggers are feelings of uncertainty, feelings of guilt, shame, depression, anxiety, especially if you're not gambling at that point. So, and over involved in the game, and become, pretty severe reactions if someone misses a catch or misses a pass in the game. The external triggers are obvious. They legalize sports gambling. There's advertising for it all over the place. People talk about sports all the time at work. So the triggers are always there if you're into the sports gambling. You can't get away from it. So what do we do about this? Okay. So we understand that it's there. We understand. And so we want to, in terms of the triggers, we want to identify the triggers, understand what triggers someone to gamble. Okay. Is it because they're upset? Is it because they're angry? Is it because they're desperate to recoup their losses? Okay. So in trying to change the course of a gambling addiction, we want to identify, well, what triggers it? Is it the game? Is it the excitement of the casino? Is it the thrill of playing the odds and trying to outsmart the system? So trying to identify what the triggers are and then compensating for those triggers, playing out the script. What happens if I take my paycheck and bet it on the football game? What's going to happen? There's a chance that I could win more money and I could put the addition on the house. There's a chance I could lose my house. And we want to play out that script. So if we're going to take gambling out of our lives because it's a problem, we have to substitute it with something else, something more positive. And if it's the rush that you get, then it needs to be something that's going to give you a general. I always joke with people here, start jumping out of airplanes, with a parachute. But, don't think that, go collecting butterflies is going to substitute for the excitement of betting on the Super Bowl. You have to find something that's going to give you the same adrenaline rush. Think about the negative experiences with gambling and not just the positive ones. If you have the urge to gamble and you really shouldn't spend the money that you have, then postpone it. I'm not going to do it today, but maybe I'll do it later. That's not the healthiest way, but it's good. It's a good line of thinking in a pinch. Getting a support network, hanging around people that don't gamble, or hanging around people that have had problem gamblings. There are gambling anonymous groups, just like there's alcoholic anonymous groups. There's gambling anonymous groups, and there's treatment programs specific to gambling. If you have trouble controlling the impulse to gamble, then get someone else to hold your money for you. Make sure the bills are paid. Or if you just want to regulate it, then you have your allowance. Here's your $5 a week to buy the lottery ticket or something like that. Okay. Again, if you've identified that gambling is a problem and you want to move away from it, you have to make lifestyle changes. I mean, that just has to happen with any treatment process. You have to make lifestyle changes. So one of the key things is that oftentimes someone with a gambling problem, someone who's experiencing problem gambling is avoiding something. You're either avoiding depression, anxiety, past trauma, some issue that needs to be dealt with, that they're covering up with the excitement of gambling. So if you're going to give up gambling because it's become a problem, then you're going to have to deal with whatever you've been avoiding. Same with substance abuse, same with someone who's drinking, same with something who's engaged in other negative types of behavior. You have to, ultimately, it's going to involve dealing with whatever it is that you're avoiding. So that's the difficult part of the treatment. Getting someone to stop spending money and holding onto their checkbook and doling out their allowance. That's all the easy part. The hard part is now I have to face with what I have, and I have to deal with it head on. And nobody really wants to do that.
Peter, does that vary if your clients come to you voluntarily, like they're seeking treatment, seeking help? Do you get other clients or patients who are like court referrals, or they're not there because they want to be?
Well, that's a whole, I could do a whole workshop on that. Mandated treatment is difficult. However, NATCHOG and the courts down here have been around for a long time. We have a very good working relationship with the courts. Most of the time we get appropriate referrals, people that can benefit from it. Mm-hmm. And so what we have seen, I'm going off script here. The courts typically are sending people into treatment because they need treatment for some kind of an addiction or mental health issue. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the court is viewing it, the criminal activity, as a symptom of the mental health or addiction disorder. Okay. Mm-hmm. They're in over their head gambling, so they're stealing. They get arrested, they go to court. Court identifies that they have an addiction, and that's why they're stealing. So let's treat the addiction so they don't stop stealing. Mm-hmm. And it works most of the time. I mean, do we ever get anyone in here who doesn't want to be in here? Of course we do. We have a conversation with the courts. We had someone come in recently, long history with the courts, and minor trip up while on probation, and sent him over here. And the guy comes in. I said, "What do you want?" I said, "What do you want to get out of here?" He says, "I don't." He said, "They made me a bubble, get you know, a whole sign." He said, "But I'm here, so I'm going to get what I can out of it. I'm going to try to make it work. I'm not going to buck the system because it's not going to work. So I'll get what I can out of it." You know, and that was,
Mhm.
you know, so, but yeah, that's a whole thing.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so if someone in your, I'm going to bring this back to gambling. Let me see if I can do this.
I distracted you. You go right back to where you were. If you're,
Well,
I pulled you right away.
if there's someone in your family or someone in your network that has a problem with gambling, you want them to get treatment.
Mhm.
They may not want it.
Mhm.
I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I know I'll win the next game, so everything will be fine. I'll get the mortgage paid off with the next win. So as a friend or a family member, what you're trying to do is create a situation where they want the treatment.
Mhm.
So you can withhold their money and, or restrict their access to those kinds of things. And then that brings up those other things that I was talking about that they try to cover up with, and kind of creating the crisis, if you will.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
So giving up gambling is hard, okay, because it's playing a very important role of covering up something else. It has an addictive nature to it, which is hard to combat. So you need to use your coping skills. And the second one on the screen, do something different, do something new, but it has to be attractive enough to make it worthwhile.
Mhm.
Okay. We don't tell people what to do. I don't tell people what their coping skill is. I tell them that they need to find out something that gets them excited. And, and usually they go back and, before I started gambling, I used to be involved in bicycle racing, or, riding bicycles, or I used to water ski, or so, something like that. And then, try to do that kind of a thing.
Mhm.
Still have to deal with the stress, just do it in a less destructive way, hopefully more productive, but at least less destructive. We hear a lot about mindfulness and grounding, kind of in the moment things. I have that urge. I need it right now, so I'm going to ground myself and in the moment. We can do it in the moment. Books, I don't know. We're sponsored by a library here, so yes, books are very important. I was thinking, because I use a Kindle, so my bookshelves have shrunk. But
Reading is good.
reading, yes, reading. We read a lot. My wife and I read a lot. Exercising, get the adrenaline going, so that I'm tired, and then get your stimulating, the hiking and nature and that kind of thing. Creative activities, music is huge, art, crafts, those kinds of things. Oftentimes people that are dealing with addictions will find a spiritual connection to it. And that's been powerful. And key with gambling is the budget. And if you decide that you're going to moderate the gambling rather than eliminate it, then there has to be a strict budget to how much you're going to spend on the gambling. And it has to be, okay, instead of going to McDonald's every morning for breakfast, I'm going to spend that money at the casino. But if I don't spend it, that kind of a thing. I'm not going to spend grocery money. I'm not going to spend rent money, or God forbid, gas money on gambling. How am I doing on time? I'm a little bit. You told me an hour, right?
You have about 5 minutes left before
I
we
got
cut
5
you off.
minutes. Okay. Let me see here. Okay, a couple of things here. So if we get into trouble gambling, usually someone who seeks treatment with gambling is after they're already in trouble. Many times people are in trouble with gambling because of the money. They just ran up too much debt, and they're in over their head in debt. So you have to deal with the debt. Okay. So these are basic debt management strategies for anybody. We could be using this slide for credit card debt. Credit, interest on credit cards is outrageous. You know, sometimes people have come in for treatment on gambling because they've lost their car, you know, they're losing their home or that kind of a thing. So part of the treatment is being honest about your gambling, being honest with your family about your gambling and how bad the situation is. Then you want to negotiate, then you have to deal with your debt. So anybody in any kind of credit or debt situation, you have to deal with the debt people directly. IRS, call them up and deal with them. You're going to be behind, but you're going to have to deal with them. I'm running out of time, so I'll skip to the good one. Bookies and loan sharks. Okay, I don't have direct experience with this, so I'm speaking secondhand information. But oftentimes people with gambling debts have trouble with bookies and loan sharks. There are ways to deal with them. They want their money. They don't care whether you have an addiction to gambling. They don't care whether you go to the Gambling Anonymous meetings. They just want their money. So sometimes you can negotiate with them as you would a credit card. And apparently if you get into the GA is Gamblers Anonymous. If you get into the Gamblers Anonymous network, there are people within Gamblers Anonymous that have experience in dealing with bookies and loan sharks and probably can help you navigate that. So it's not a hopeless situation. Okay, there are ways to do it because they're interested in your money. They're not interested in damaging you to get the money. They're just interested in getting the money. So just work with it directly. Back to your question, Julie, about buying, you know, responsible gambling. There is such a thing as responsible gambling. And if it's structured, be informed, know that you're going to lose your money. You know, if gambling isn't fun, then stop gambling. You're not going to win. If, you know, have a budget, God, don't use your credit card and put it in the slot machine and start pushing the button until the credit card is maxed out. Oh my God, that's not a healthy way to do it. Don't use gambling as a way to supplement your income, and don't think that your strategies are going to outwit Foxwoods and Mohegan Suns or the sports gambling networks. People, they're smarter than we are, and they know how to do it. So I think I'm pretty much there. Questions? We have a Q&A time.
Antidepressants, I understand. What kind of drugs are mood stabilizers? What are those?
For bipolar disorder, lithium,
yeah,
Depakote, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, if the antidepressants aren't strong enough, we'll step it up a little bit to the Depakotes and those kinds of things. Seroquel.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So in terms of treatment for gambling, there is Gamblers Anonymous, which runs parallel to AA and NA. Gam-Anon is another one. Smart Recovery is gaining traction because it's not as spiritually based as some of the other 12-stepping ones. There is residential treatment available in Connecticut for people with problem gambling. It's hard to get into. It does exist, yeah. And
where?
A lot of that treatment is funded by the casinos. That's part of the deal.
Oh, wow.
When they gave the money to the state, they had to. So some of it was reserved for treatment. So,
yay.
so, other questions?
So thinking about this in terms of youth, I'm thinking it isn't so much of a problem if a kid doesn't have access to a credit card or a substantial amount of money. It's probably a thing with older teens and maybe kids like in college starting out. Maybe is that where you usually see it? It's not a middle school kid problem, or
no. It's but what you want to watch for is what's their relationship with the gambling.
Right. All the usual triggers. But for a kid, I'm thinking in terms of the highs and the endorphin and they're so much more reckless at certain ages.
Right.
So I could see where they'd get in kind of deep, but
they could get in deep. They may not run into the financial problems, but if they're hustling their friends for money,
Yeah.
you know, on the, you know, that kind of a thing. Again, it's what the relationship is.
Yeah.
Usually, I mean, what, you know, because most of the gambling problems are underground and we're not seeing a lot of it, we have to look for the kind of coexist, what we call the comorbidity, the coexisting behavior.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
The
are they hustling kids?
ADHD.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
are they hustling kids on the playground? You know, are
Mhm.
they, you know, that kind of thing, or mimicking that kind of behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, now kids will experiment, okay? And if a kid learns how to play poker and they spend 3 weeks trying to play poker or trying to bet on the game, but it's not causing anybody any harm, and if they stop doing it and it's okay, then it's not a problem, okay? Now that, you know, remember, it's only 5 or 10% of the population that
Mhm.
have a problem with gambling.
Mhm.
So again, it's you want to look at the kid in the larger thing. The gambling and the gambling behavior may be a symptom of something else, you
Yeah.
know,
Right.
and
Of
so
course.
you want to put it into the context of that, rather than, oh my God, he's playing poker. You know, they're upstairs in the bedroom playing poker. That's a problem. Not necessarily,
Mm.
but if that's all they're doing and they're not doing their homework and they're not coming down for dinner and they're missing their favorite TV show because they're playing poker,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
then it may be a different kind of problem, you know.
Mhm.
So you kind of want to look at it in the whole with the kids.
Mm.
Now with the online, you know, if they're buried in the phone, as a parent, you want to know what they're buried in the phone with,
Yeah.
you know.
Could be
And,
anything.
could be anything, yeah. Okay.
Interesting.
I thought it was interesting, Peter, when I saw March Madness pop up on
Yeah.
the screen there. Because, you know, I remember that from college. I remember filling out the bracket
Sure.
and all you
Yeah.
lost was $5 or maybe a 6-pack of Bud Light or something like that, right? As a college kid. And I just wonder now that there's sports betting in the state of Connecticut, places like the University of Connecticut are trying to prepare for when all the students are back on campus.
Mhm.
And really betting on these things would be more exciting for them, especially when they're under so much pressure as it is.
Mm.
Again, most of the kids that are betting on, you know, betting a 6-pack on March Madness at UConn, that's probably okay.
Right.
You know, it's the one that doesn't stop or bets
Right.
or, you know, bets more money than he can afford, or doesn't stop, or is harassing people and because they're waiting for the results, or
Right.
pacing the floor waiting for the results, you know.
I guess-
Again, it has to do with the relationship that you have with it.
Right. Do you think that it will be worse though now that they could bet together online for larger stakes?
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's way too easy. So if you're
Mhm.
susceptible to that,
Yeah.
it's going to be very easy. You got your cell phone in front of you and you got your credit card
Yeah.
right there.
Right.
You
Right.
know, so it's much easier to slide into that,
Mhm.
much easier.
Mm.
And so, you want to monitor it, and, you know, be aware of, you know, how much is being spent on it. You know,
Right.
I mean, you know, me dropping $10 on March Madness would be, you know, I mean, I couldn't imagine spending that much money on something I'm not going to get a return on. But if I did, it's harmless. It's, you know, I can
Yeah.
afford the, and I look at it as I'm losing the $10.
Yeah, for sure.
When I buy my lottery ticket for
Yeah.
$2
It's
3
gone.
times a year, it's I'm buying $2 worth of daydreaming.
Yeah.
You know?
That's
You know,
right.
that's how I
Yeah.
look at it. I don't expect to win.
Yeah. It's almost like entertainment,
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
that exactly, you know.
Right.
Hmm.
So it all goes back to what role it plays in your life and your relationship with it.
Mhm.
But I do think that now that it's legal, there's going to be more of it. With the technology, it's much more accessible. So it's an easy way for someone with other issues to slide into that and have it become a problem.
Mhm.
Much easier. So we have to watch it more carefully.
It's really
Mhm.
jarring, the statistics you gave about the state of New York and the number of
Yeah,
Yeah.
You know,
That's
that's
amazing.
a third of the state of Connecticut rushing to sign up for something.
Right.
It's so
right.
wild.
And I got those a few weeks ago. That wasn't that long ago. I
Right.
think a couple weeks after you told me I was doing this is when I got those statistics.
asked you if you
That's right. I volunteered for this.
Right. Yeah, Kate gave you the job and I elevated you to doctor. I give you an
Doctor.
MD
There
today.
you go.
So I'm thinking, well, again, I remember when I was in college, the credit card companies were aggressively, mailing, trying to get us to take out cards and so on.
Sure.
And so I just counseled my own daughters when they were going off to college, just, know that they target you guys because they know that you want to get out and spend some money and, have some retail therapy. So I guess the honest conversations are always good, even, to know.
Have it be okay. Yeah, you have those conversations and it's okay to talk about it. So you've opened up the door,
Right.
and,
Yeah.
that it's okay to talk about it and, okay, you want it. So how much can you afford to spend, low cap on the credit card,
Yeah.
What's going to happen if someone scams your card? Are you going to be able to pay it?
Right.
Those kinds of things,
Yeah.
and,
So it seems like as it progresses and in its severity, it becomes more secretive. People are more they're perhaps more desperate and more isolated. I can just see them with their phones and just but in isolation, ping 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 kind of. Yeah.
So like with your grandson,
Yeah.
you say one of them was 14?
He's 14. Yeah, he'll be
You
going
can
into
put
high
on-
school next year. But I'm just like a
Geez,
neurotic granny.
what's that thing on your phone? What are you doing
Yeah.
on the phone? Show me how this works. I've never seen this before.
Yeah.
Show me how it works. So how often do you get into that site? Those kinds of, Columbo kind of thing,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
but just to show interest in it.
Yeah.
And then they can talk to you about it. And then you can see what and then you bring it up. How's that going?
Right.
And kind of monitor it. But have it be a conversation.
Yeah. Be alert.
Be
Yes.
alert, be aware,
Yeah.
but it also opens up the conversation.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
he may come to you and say, geez, I did a little bit more than I should have last week.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you, and then
Yeah.
talk
But,
about how to prevent that from happening.
right. Grandma's not going to bail him out.
Yeah. Yeah. Not necessarily bail him out, but
No.
okay, the way you can prevent it is, remember, we only said $20, this kind of a thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
Good advice.
showing an interest in that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
It'll be your
Thank
turn in about 14 years.
Right. So thank you. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Jennifer.
Sure. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Yep. Have a good
Appreciate
evening. UConn's
Appreciate it.
playing 8:30, the men.
Oh,
Gotta go.
There's a bet.
I'll check the phone, see what the bet.
There you go. Yeah. Bye.
Thanks a
All right,
lot.
bye.
Good
Thank you.
night.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. You gonna stay on, Kate, for a second?
Yep, hang on.